Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter. Joined as always by Ross Binder, our managing editor, and Adam Jacoby, our publisher over at Hawkeye Beacon. Before we get started, make sure you smash that subscribe button, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know what you're thinking about the situation at hand. And boy, do we have a situation at hand in Iowa football right now. We started getting rumblings of everything last night. Kirk Ferentz, he is officially, it was reported by Scott Docterman last night as well, but we now know that he will face a one-game suspension for recruiting violations in December of 2022. Presumably, all of the things we've heard is it's about Cade McNamara, but Kirk would not outline that, of course. Not only Kirk facing the suspension, but Jon Budmayr as well, wide receivers coach for the Hawkeyes, who presumably spearheaded, is that the past tense of spearhead? Okay, spearheaded the recruitment of Cade McNamara out of the portal. And yeah, really interesting timing. We got that email about the presser. I think Adam and I was confused. I was like, are we getting named are we getting the quarterback starter named? Like, what's going on here? And then, of course, those rumblings, we got wind of everything last night. Unable to report in time for Scott to get to it. But, man, this is the first time Kirk will be not on the sidelines in his 26 years as the head coach of the Hawkeyes. And so we'll be seeing somebody else as the head man, even though it's just in his absence for the first time in 26 years. That in itself is worth a take from either Adam and Ross here.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable because this is going to be the first time since 1978 that somebody other than Hayden Fry or Kirk Ferentz will be the head coach of the Iowa football team. Again, like you said, it's just one game. We're talking about an interim head coach, which is going to be Seth Wallace, who was just named assistant head coach over the offseason last year. But nonetheless, the first time in 26 years that Kirk Ferentz will not be the head coach of the Hawkeyes for one game. And yeah, I mean, guys, it feels pretty momentous. It feels out of the blue. And Eliot, like you said, we started to get those rumblings last night, later in the night. And candidly, my first reaction was, a little odd, because we're talking about a guy that for the last quarter century has had pretty much the most sparkly clean reputation in the NCAA. Like never any hints of major recruiting violations or anything like that. So yeah, when we got that email, it was a little odd because it was a little bit out of the ordinary, but also you would not be expected to read into that, oh, he's about to announce his own suspension like that. You would sooner expect that he was going to announce that he was shaving his hair into a mohawk and he was going to coach like that this season, right? Like it's that level of out of the ordinary for him. So yeah. And then once those rumors started to pick up steam, it was like, oh, this might actually be something, and it turned into something very quickly. So yeah, a little whirlwind to say the least. Ross, what was your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pointed out that it's a big deal, and to me it feels like it's both a big deal and also not at all a big deal because of the infraction. I think the fact that he's not coaching on the sideline for the first time in 26 years at Iowa, definitely a big deal. And that is over a quarter century he has been on the sidelines at Iowa coaching every game. So for that not to be the case for even for 1 week does feel like the world has tipped off its axis a little bit, at least in Iowa City. On the other hand, the fact that this is happening because of what's essentially the NCAA equivalent of going 10 miles over the speed limit in University Heights, or a jaywalking violation practically. Like it's a thing, and it's against the rules, obviously, but how much it's a thing that Eliot has mentioned in his article today, that if every coaching staff and every program in the country isn't doing something similar or hasn't done something similar, it would be truly shocking. So it's on one, it's a little difficult to reconcile the fact that, it's, oh my, no Kirk, big deal. But the reason we have no Kirk is because of this strain, this infraction that just doesn't feel like it warrants the big thing happening, essentially. But
So you alluded to it there, Ross. What I wrote in my 3 thoughts article for our premium subscribers was every program in the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, the 2 teams that are left technically in the Pac-12, the MVFC, the Sun Belt, the American, the MAC, every single program is doing this across the country. Every single one. I guarantee it.
And if they're not trying, right? Like they're
if they're not,
to fail at that. Yeah.
They're definitely not winning.
Yeah.
Definitely not. What this does, I mean, it's just another one of those things, and Chad Leistikow referenced it today in the presser. It's what Caden Proctor, for all the things that have been said and done about what happened in the spring, he said Tyler Barnes, he didn't say it outright, but he said somebody from the staff texted me and said things will be okay. Or like everything that happened with the gambling situation and Noah Shannon last year. Like, it's just these things that are, I guarantee, again, I would put my life savings, if I had a house and a mortgage, I would put my mortgage on this, that this is happening at every single program. But here we are again, Iowa gets caught. And what that reflects to me is either, well, gambling aside, because students knew they couldn't do it, they did it anyway, is like loose lips sink ships again with Proctor, and with assuming this was tipped off by Cade in that podcast he did with Jordan Palmer. And 3 is Iowa just like bad at cheating? Like, are they, because in these situations, what do? You talk to a high school head coach, you talk to a family friend, and you use these back channels to communicate to the, and again, we know this because 1, it's super easy to figure out, and 2, because everybody's doing it. And apparently they didn't do that. Apparently Kirk and Bud were right there involved, at least based on what we've heard and what we've learned so far. And again, this is still an NCAA and like ongoing investigation, which is just interesting. I know Kirk said he wants to, well, 1, very much wanted to take responsibility for all this, despite the fact that it's happening across all of college football, right? That seemed to be an emphasis from Kirk. He's a man that takes responsibility for issues, for mistakes, etc. One of the many things that makes me respect him as a head coach and as a leader. But where was I going with that? That's one thing that he definitely wanted to take responsibility. Where was I going with that? Sorry, guys. He definitely wanted to take responsibility. There you go.
Yeah. So one thing that he mentioned, you mentioned the loose lips sort of thing, and again, it's an ongoing NCAA thing, so they were always going to be tight with the details. Yeah. You got that now.
I remembered where I was going. Do you mind if I interject here, Adam?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's an ongoing investigation, and because he wanted to take responsibility and Iowa wanted to get out ahead of this thing, that's why they self-imposed the 1-game suspension, right? And essentially, I mean, if you don't self-report, if you don't self-impose, it's like being caught in a lie by your parents, right? If you admit, or not even parents, we're all grown adult men, but like your parents when you're a kid, or your boss, or what have you, and it gets worse because you get caught in the lie rather than admitting to the fault, right? And I think that's what they were going for here. Serve the 1-game suspension. This is my fault. I want to take responsibility. We move forward. NCAA doesn't do anything. I think that's their hope. They hope the NCAA doesn't give him 3 more games, whatever it is.
Well, and I would just add one thing from a pragmatic standpoint. If you're gonna get suspended, the Illinois State game is not a pretty good game to sit out from Ferentz's standpoint. It's not a game against Iowa State or a Big Ten game. So, sorry, Adam, you were going to add something else.
Yeah, Eliot, to your point, the old saying is the cover up is always worse than the crime. And the fact that I was not putting forth basically any effort to cover this up, and Kirk has been remarkably forthcoming about this, aggressively forthcoming as it turns out. Now that being said, they did mention that this is an ongoing NCAA investigation. So like you said, Eliot, theoretically there could be more coming up, but the nature of this, just the fact that they were talking with it was a little bit curious that he said that it was contact with both the player, which he wouldn't name, and family. So that makes me sort of wonder if that is how things were found out, or if that sort of pushes things to a level 2. But clearly they've got the NCAA, who, let's remember, guys, does not have subpoena power here. So the NCAA got somehow evidence of the impermissible contact, and the Kirk and Beth were never going to be forthcoming about how they got it. But Kirk did say, and I'll read the quote here: "I think there's some unique circumstances surrounding this particular case, but the bottom line is it was impermissible contact. That's what the investigation is about. And the facts are the facts, and there's a line, and I cross that line." And so Kirk was remarkably, focused on taking his own responsibility for this, right? Like there was no deflection of blame. When people asked about, were you aware of the rules? He didn't really get into the specifics of that, but he always recentered it on, I'm taking responsibility for this, which is a great message, and certainly a stark contrast to the way Jim Harbaugh handled the Connor Stallions situation in Michigan. But it does raise some questions about what those unique circumstances were. And so once the NCAA tells Iowa the investigation's closed, however long that's going to be, I think we're going to find out some more details about how this came to be, because ultimately, guys, if this comes down to trying to nail somebody for talking to a recruit before they enter the portal, Eliot, like you said, there goes most of the NCAA, if not all of them. So the unique circumstances that are apparently out there and that have apparently informed this investigation, this suspension, and all that, it'll be curious to see what those unique circumstances are. And I would presume that at some point we'll find them out. But as it stands right now, nobody in Iowa City wants to divulge those details quite yet.
I tell you what, writing that follow-up article was pretty easy because we got a lot of the same thing over and over again from Kirk and Beth. I appreciate the question, but there's only so much we can talk about here. I think we only got one appreciate the question, but nonetheless. So it was a lot of what you just said, Adam. Take full responsibility. Not going to elaborate on the timeline, not going to elaborate on what exactly happened or who told on us or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the other thing too, and I've heard this on a few other podcasts, is Kirk appeared remorseful and almost embarrassed. And he did get emotional talking about missing that first game. Like, I mean, he's going to miss that first game against Illinois State. And we didn't get that at all when he was talking about Noah Shannon in the gambling situation. At all. He went after the NCAA more or less. And there's a difference in that, right? The difference is it was a player versus him. And he went to bat for Noah Shannon repeatedly and went after the NCAA repeatedly when we asked about this situation or that gambling situation. And this time around, he's taking it on the chin and going forward. And man, he did. I take it you noticed, Adam, that he did get pretty emotional at a couple different points of the presser.
Yeah, there was one moment, and I think the more noticeable emotional moment for him when he was talking about not being around the team, and he mentioned, I pretty sure, again, like these press conferences were always just sort of navigating the word salad of a head coach, and that's not a Kirk Ferentz specific sort of thing. That's just anytime you get a football coach talking to a room one-sided for close to half an hour, you sort of have to navigate it in real time. But the moment where he got the most choked up, I believe he was referring to the game in 2004 when his father had passed away. And so he had spent most of that week away from the team, although he did coach them on Saturday. And of course, that was the now infamous 6-4 game at Penn State at Happy Valley in 2004, which, again, a little bit fitting as the Ferentz family had originally been from Pennsylvania and either Western or Central PA too. So that still, to this day, 20 years later, is obviously going to have a very emotional resonance with Kirk. But also, we've sort of seen that emotion come up with him a few times whenever he really has to sort of stop and take stock about his team's investment in him and vice versa. It's always good emotion. It's always appreciative emotion. But that is something that we've started to see a little bit more from him. But yeah, you can absolutely tell that the fact that his lapse in judgment is going to take him away from a game day for, again, the first time since the 20th century, the Bill Clinton era of the White House. It's going to be the first time since then that he's not on the sidelines in Iowa City or, with his team, with the Hawkeyes for a game in that long. And yeah, you can tell that is weighing on him, and it would be a little bit weird if it weren't, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, what do you guys think he's going to be doing during kickoff, during the game? Just sitting at home? Is he going to get a barbecue together with the Budmayr family?
He did say that he was going to be watching at home very quietly, was his the way he put it. We'll see how long that very quiet lasts, because now there's nobody to throw a flag when you're cussing out the referees. So I don't know. It's Eliot. You're barely 26 yourself. You're 27, 28 now. Like, anything that you haven't done since you're 2 years old, like, there's only so much you can do to predict how you're going to react to that sort of situation. Ross, you're closer to my age. Is there anything that you haven't done in a quarter century that you now know how you would handle it this time around?
Shots fired, man.
I'm bolder than you.
Oh, I know.
You at least have your hair.
Thank you. Anything I haven't done in 26 years. I mean, what I was doing 26 years ago was probably pretty stupid. So it's probably a good thing that I'm no longer doing it, I think. So yeah, in terms of Kirk, it is interesting. What is he going to do on game day? Because this is completely unfamiliar territory for him. Watching Iowa play a game that he's not coaching, that will just feel like an out-of-body experience for him for 3 hours, I'm guessing. So
I wonder if it sort of redoubles his commitment. Not that his commitment to the program was ever wavering per se, but this is, we're talking about a guy who's the elder statesman, the dean of FBS coaches, and the prospect of retirement's been hanging over him for a while now. So maybe he actually gets this taste of it and he's like, oh, I hate this. Like, oh no, I can't retire now. Knowing what we know about Kirk's personality, I think that's going to be more of a likely outcome than him being like, oh no, this is great. I think he's not going to enjoy not coaching, but we'll see how that works out.
I was going to throw that in there too. How many years did this add on to his coaching career? This one game.
I'll take the over.
You're right. With that said, Coach Seth Wallace, linebackers coach / assistant defensive coordinator / assistant head coach, will be leading the way for Iowa on August 31st. And I think that's a good thing for a couple reasons. There possibly could have been a few other routes that Iowa could have gone. I mean, like Tim Lester's been a head coach before, right? But this is also his first game as Iowa's offensive coordinator, so that would be a hell of a move to make. Phil Parker very clearly does not want to be a head coach. I mentioned him and Jay Neiman being some of the more experienced guys on the roster. I don't think they were going to put Jay Neiman in that situation, the assistant defensive line coach. And of course, LeVar Woods is a guy that we could all see being a future head coach as well. But that means that each coordinator gets to stick to their phase of the game, which is important.
I would agree with that. I agree that it makes sense. One question that I sort of wondered on that front was just, you know, and as the presser went along, we sort of understood that we were not going to get an answer to this. But one thing that I wanted to come out of that presser was, did Kirk Ferentz know that he had a suspension waiting for him in week 1 when he, named Seth Wallace the assistant head coach? Based off of what we were told, it's murky. But it's the fact that they didn't really come out with this self-imposed suspension until yesterday, on its face, the answer to that question is no. But again, we'll see how long this has actually been going on once they're able to divulge more details. But I'm very curious about that part, if that designation of Wallace was made with the understanding that assistant head coach really meant head coach for week 1.
I had the same thought, Adam, because I mean, it is the timing is pretty interesting, if nothing else, that Iowa, Ferentz appoints an assistant head coach for the first time in 26 years at Iowa. And then literally the next game on Iowa's schedule after he does that, oh, hey, it turns out this new assistant head coach is actually going to be the for real head coach for 1 week only. But maybe it is just coincidence, but it is a interesting coincidence to say the least. And to Eliot's point, I think Wallace makes sense. I mean, both, from just the title standpoint, obviously, and this is, suspension or not, I think Kirk has probably been thinking about this for a while in terms of Wallace and his role and the respect he has for his ability. But it also makes sense, one thing Ferentz mentioned today was, making sure everything stays as normal as possible in the prep for that game against Illinois State and during game day itself, obviously without him. And you're certainly going to be able to do that much better if you've got, Phil Parker just, running the defense. You've got Tim Lester running the offense, LeVar Woods running the special teams, just like they would any other week or any other game day. So, you're not adding any sort of head coaching responsibilities on top of what they're already doing and what they're already very good at. So,
and one more thing to add on Phil Parker: only one arm.
Yeah.
Head coaching is a very famously ambidextrous job. You got to hold the play sheet, you got to cover your mouth with your other hand. Like you can't be one armed and doing this job.
Well, do we know, is it his flag throwing arm too that's hurt? I mean, he might not even be able to throw a challenge flag.
It all matters.
Yeah.
As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by my fire alarm that hopefully you won't be able to hear in this edited version of HawkCast, what I was saying was, as a potential successor to Kirk down the road, who knows when that's going to be, who knows if it will be Seth Wallace, but this has got to be invaluable experience for somebody like Seth Wallace, who presumably, if not a head coach at Iowa, will probably be a head coach somewhere else at some point. He's got that pedigree. He's well respected in the coaching community, especially at Iowa. He's done obviously a phenomenal job with the linebackers, with the Hawkeyes, and having experience, whether it's against Illinois State or somebody else, at least one game before you step into the shoes of officially being a head coach somewhere. That's That's huge. Whether it's one game, 2 games, however many games, it's something. And something is better than nothing when you're becoming a head coach at the college football level.
Yeah, any aspiring head coach, I would guess any sort of head coaching reps they could get are going to be tremendously valuable. So for Wallace, this would be, just excellent experience to add to his resume. And you mentioned the linebackers. There's another reason that having him in this role makes sense. If there's a position unit that needs coaching less than the linebackers on the Iowa roster, like I can't name it, because you've got 3, the starters there are all 5th or even 6th year guys. Like they have as much experience as Seth Wallace. I mean, not totally, but they have a ton of experience. They know exactly what they're doing. And, if there's a unit where your position coach is going to be, more preoccupied with head coaching duties, probably linebackers where you'd want it to be at, because you can probably trust Higgins and Jackson to handle things pretty well there.
Kyler Fisher,
yeah,
and
Fisher,
linebacker, of course.
Yeah, and again, Wallace is going to be the first guy who's been able to put head coach of Iowa football, even for one game, first guy that's going to be able to put that on his resume since Kirk and Hayden. And you're going back 45 years at that point. And so, yeah, whether this is something that leads to him being the next head coach at Iowa, the next head coach at, I don't know, Kent State, UCLA, what have you. I've heard that place is in Los Angeles. It's a tremendous resume point, and even above and beyond just being assistant head coach, and which is remarkable in and of itself, because what it really means is you've been job shadowing Kirk Ferentz of all head coaches. So, again, we're talking about a guy that basically got his foot in the door as a recruiting specialist, and has worked his way up, earned his respect on the way up, is being, sort of guided, mentored by Kirk Ferentz. You really can't ask for a whole lot more from an assistant head coach to really get him prepared for this sort of week 1 stopgap emergency head coaching job that he's going to do. So, yeah, like it's going to look good on his resume, but his resume has brought him to this point too. He's worked his way up to it. So, yeah, like, is he Kirk Ferentz? No, but I don't think that Iowa fans should be worried at all about this. And, Kirk even mentioned at his presser, Eliot, he expects this to be a sort of seamless transition just for this 1 week. And that's not the sort of thing, Kirk Ferentz doesn't say that emptily. He doesn't, just toss out, something that reflects on their preparation willy-nilly. So they're certainly confident in Seth Wallace to, do this and to do this role in a really unfortunate circumstance.
What are the odds we get a Seth Wallace crying clip like we got from Sharon Moore last season? I'm gonna say like 0 negative. Is negative possible here? Because it's just not gonna happen. But what do you guys think?
50-1 that he doesn't. Right? No, come on. There's no cult of personality in Iowa City that the way that Harbaugh ran Ann Arbor. There's just not.
Yeah.
I don't think that's in Wallace's makeup, at least right now.
Not yet. We have 8 days to find out.
I was just gonna say, if he keeps shadowing Ferentz, that would become part of his makeup, because
30 years from now.
Right. I mean, Ferentz is famously one of the most emotional head coaches in a good way, but he definitely shows his emotions often.
One thing that I think we need to address too in all this, it's kind of getting swept under the rug. I mean, I mentioned it in the intro. Jon Budmayr is not going to be on the sidelines for what would have been his first game as the wide receivers coach for the Hawkeyes. And this is a really young group that could really use the receivers coach on the sidelines. Like, who do you go to step in?
And without Caleb Brown too, among the
exactly. And he's one of the more veteran guys, if you could call him that. You kind of have to at this point. Caden Weegan being the only senior Do they look to Caden Weegan? Do they look to Jacob Gill? Do you have a staff member step up that could be on the sideline? I know Jason Manson played wide receiver when he was in college. This is I don't know the rules for NCAA to have a situation like that. Another coach step on the sideline for something like that, or maybe Abdul Hodge because he's the tight ends coach. Like, do you have your GA Tanner Kruger who it works with the wide receivers really step up in? I think it's his first year with the program. He's previously with Wayne State. Like, well, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and hopefully maybe we'll get some answers next week, with some of the press availabilities, maybe, who knows. But I would think Hodge and Lester would be the game day guys that would probably, be the most, although they're obviously going to be busy with their own units and Lester with the offense as a whole. In terms of Manson or another coach, it's, if they're not part of the staff, I think it's hard for them to be involved on game day. Right, Adam? I mean, that was.
But there are so many people on the sideline during games, right? Like, it's just, and you never know what the NCAA, what the rules look like and all that stuff.
I mean, that was the thing with Budmayr before he got this official,
right?
Head, assistant coaching position, was that he was limited in some of what he could do in terms of interactions with the players. But Adam, you're going to add something, hopefully.
Yeah, we've heard a few times from teammates that Jacob Gill is, really stepping into a leadership role. I don't think we ever heard the term specifically coach on the field, but maybe this is his chance to do that, right? Like to as literally as possible. But this is sort of a situation, and again, Ross, to your earlier point, it really helps that this is against Illinois State, not Iowa State. But this is sort of a situation where, maybe you do lean on Abdul Hodge because, receivers are receivers. Obviously the positions are different. Don't put on the internet that Adam said wide receivers and tight ends are the same thing. But it's, it's another sort of situation where at the very least there's some skill overlap, there's some role overlap. That sort of eases that sort of transition. But, also it's sort of a situation where it's yeah, staff screwed up, and this is a hardship that we're going to deal with for 1 week. Find a way to make it work. And I rarely quote Donald Rumsfeld for a variety of reasons, but the one quote of his that really stands out to me is, "You go to war with the army you have, not the army you want." And I was starting the season with an army they have, and it's certainly less than 100%. And so, all right. So be it. This you got to play the game anyway.
We shall see how it shakes out. And like this also for Jon Budmayr himself would have been a great opportunity for him to just get his feet wet, right? In that new role. It's different than Kirk. Kirk's been doing it forever. He doesn't need this game. Would he like to be there? Of course. Of course. But do you need him? Not necessarily. I think Coach Wallace is going to do a solid job in lieu of his absence, and wide receivers position is definitely going to be interesting. Of course, I'll be in Colorado next week, so Adam, you best ask that question while I'm gone. But I'm sure if you don't, somebody will. I'm really intrigued by that, and even though I'll be in Colorado next week, I might do some writing while out there as well. And of course, we'll have some content. We'll have our preview episode for Illinois State as well with Randy Reinhardt. That's already been recorded prior to my this presser with Kirk. So I'll include some pre or additional audio on the podcast regarding that. While we have you, we also want to remind you we are running another wild deal on Hawkeye Beacon right now. You can get your entire first year. If you missed that first 70% off, you can get 60% off your entire year of premium content, your first entire year of premium content at Hawkeye Beacon right now. We had the rumblings from last night on our board before it went public. We had information about the quarterback situation coming out of camp and last Saturday's closed scrimmage. We've had a bunch of intel on recruiting, all the men's basketball official visitors that are coming this fall. We got all of it right there on our premium board in premium content on recruiting, basketball and football and stuff on the on campus stuff with the actual teams going on behind the scenes too. So would love to have you join us. Do that today. That promo code is kickoff 2024. It's kickoff 2024. Don't miss that. And of course, our autofill link will be in the description. You just scroll right on down. You can click that link and sign up today. 60% off your entire first year at Hawkeye Beacon of premium content. We'd love to have you. Now, one more takeaway from today's presser that we had to get up on the site before we sat down to record. It appears as though Cade McNamara will be Iowa's starter for game 1 against Illinois State. Kirk wouldn't come out and say it flat out, but he said if Iowa had a game tomorrow, Cade would be their starter, followed by Brendan Sullivan and then Marco Lainez in that 3 spot. Ross, you read my article about it. What do you think about that decision, or that presumed decision to start Cade in week 1 by Kirk?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. It's along the lines of kind of what we've been talking about, I think, all off season, kind of where we thought things were headed. And one of the things, Kirk said in terms of, one thing that gives McNamara a pretty big edge in that little quarterback derby is just his experience in Iowa City, his experience in the program. That's always been a huge factor for Kirk in making personnel decisions, and especially a quarterback. And it's not the least bit surprising that, that could be, although he didn't say it, but, if that's potentially, if they're pretty even, that could be a key tiebreaker for Ferentz, that, Cade's been here another year. He's got, stronger relationships with guys and et cetera. And Ferentz has often, over his 26 years here, he's kind of defaulted to the more experienced hand, as it were. And so it's not unexpected to see him doing that here. And like he mentioned, McNamara has a lot of Big Ten reps. He did well at Michigan. He led them into the college football playoff. So, that's another thing that even though, there's a fair amount of distance that we're getting to now from when those things actually happened, they're still there. They still happen. They're still reps that inform the player he is now, and hopefully things that he's able to draw on the field. So, yeah, for me, I would say it makes sense based on kind of, I think, everything that we've heard and talked about this offseason. So it didn't surprise me too much. Adam, what about you? Where did you come down on this one?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I was surprised per se. Eliot, when you asked Kirk about that at the press conference, the way that he phrased McNamara's edge as a teammate, as and in experience as well, he called it an unfair advantage, and he didn't mean that in a derogatory way or anything like that. But what he's saying is this is a little bit impossible for Sullivan to overcome when he's just joining the team in the middle of the offseason. It's sort of similar to if Nick Jackson had come in last year, but he was competing against, Jay Higgins, right? It's that sort of level of yeah, this is a really big hurdle. So when he says unfair advantage, what that communicates to me is they weren't necessarily expecting Sullivan to overcome that, right? This isn't something that reflects negatively on Sullivan. And what that also tells me is there is an expiration date on an advantage like that. If that comfort and confidence on the field doesn't come quick enough, and Iowa's schedule ramps up pretty quick because, Iowa State's always going to be tough. Their defense is going to be tough this year. Troy, we'll see what we get out of the Trojans, but historically that's been a stronger team coming out of that. I think I can't even tell which conference they're in now, but I think they're in the Sun Belt for most of their, coming out of whatever non-major SEC conference it is that they play in, right? They've been, one of those, 10-3, 9-4 type of teams historically. So they know how to play good competitive football down there. And they've got a few Power 5 teams that they've knocked off in that process. So, there aren't going to be a whole lot of easy wins on the schedule. And if McNamara keeps playing like we saw him at Kids Day, right, like if that accuracy doesn't come around, if that confidence in where his receivers are going to be doesn't come around, if that rapport isn't there, then all of those, actual moments of optimism, especially as it relates to him, trusting his ACL and pulling the ball down, things like that, that's only going to get him so far. And we know that Sullivan is preparing hard. We know that he's showing up to the football complex, earlier than everybody else, 5:15 in the morning every day, right? Like we know Sullivan's putting in the work. And Ferentz also mentioned, Eliot, that he is not above playing two QBs, that everything's on the table, especially now with this new offense. So I'm not quite sure that I would read too much into that unfair advantage, other than, it's not going to be around forever. Eliot, did you get that sense that he really, really left that door cracked for Sully?
I'll tell you, I'll be honest and say no. I will say that I want to go back and look at the quote and make sure that I know it to be what I remember it being. Let's see if I can find it here. But
it's at 2740 in our Slack transcript.
Okay. I'm working to find it here momentarily. I know it was Pat Hardy who asked that question. Something that I didn't even think of, because I do kind of buy into the moniker of, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one, right? But I just don't really see it happening here. I'm struggling to find it. Do you have that quote right in front of you, Adam?
Well, I've got his quote to you in particular, the one that you asked at the end of the press conference was what I was reading off of. So I'll read what we've got here. I'll try to navigate the Slack transcription.
I actually just found it too. The one I was looking for, that question from Pat. He said, I think we have a really, I thought I found it. Never mind. I didn't find it. Sorry.
Well, I'll read what he told you at your question at the end of the presser. Well, I mean, he's had an unfair advantage over this. He's established himself as a respected leader on the team. He's been here a couple of years now, and it starts there. And we've got a big group of those guys, and he's certainly on that. So he's talking about those, 5th-year, 6th-year grad students at that point. And he's done a good job on the field, and both of the QBs, just want to be fair. But he's, Kirk says, in my way of looking at McNamara, he's a game experienced player in this conference. Again, applies to Sullivan too. He's played in tough games and done well and very, very successful, but it's been a long haul back and basically hasn't been healthy for 2 years. So it's just good to see him the last couple of days look more relaxed. He was pressing, trying to force things like that. So that's where Kirk was evaluating McNamara.
Okay. I'm having trouble finding the quote, but I remember him saying that that's something that I haven't done since like the 80s, which of course he referenced the 80s. But didn't they kind of go back and forth with Jake Rudock and CJ Beathard? Did they like alternate drives or something when they had that quarterback battle? Anything like that at all?
I don't think there was too much alternating with Rudock and Beathard. I remember Stanzi and Christensen in 08, the first few games, there was some rotating with seeing both of what they could do in games, and then Stanzi was more effective and became the starter from, I think, about the third or fourth game on. Is that your recollection, Adam?
The my recollection specifically of the Beathard and Rudock era was that Ferentz kind of hung on to Rudock a little bit too long, and quite famously made a point of naming Beathard the starting QB on a depth chart as soon as the season ended. which sort of precipitated Rudock to Michigan. And so Cade McNamara sort of became the player to be named later in that trade. And all it did was cost Kirk Ferentz 1 game of eligibility. So still up in the air whether, that trade worked out better for Michigan or Iowa. But, I guess that's what this season is for. Eliot, what do you got?
1 game and a bunch of collective money. But who could have foreseen that coming? So regarding the 2 quarterback thing, Kirk said we'd probably rather not do that. It all worked okay in 81, but anyway, our preference is to have 1, 2, 3. We'll see how that shakes out. But, so this is what you were getting at here, Adam, but we're going to keep an open mind all season long about our entire football team, which again, very generic reference by Kirk. We're trying to put the guys out there that give us the best chance. What I'm encouraged about is I think we're seeing players look more comfortable, and that's a good thing.
I think,
I would have thought that was a bad thing, Kirk. Sorry, go ahead.
I think my read on that is that, McNamara gets first crack at the job. He'll be the starter. But he's not guaranteed that job for the duration of the season. That if there are struggles, I think there's going to be some willingness to see what Sullivan can do. I don't think there's going to be a scheduled rotation of the two. That's not in the books. But if McNamara is not effective, I don't think they're going to have too much compunction about yanking him and giving Sullivan an opportunity to see what he can do.
And I think that's why Kirk wasn't willing to say, yeah, Cade's our starter today.
Yeah, I could see that. And the one thing that I'll add too is even if the answer were yes, we're probably not getting that out of Ferentz at this point in the camp thing. Like they've played everything close to the vest in terms of where their QB race is, how they plan to use Sullivan, whether they plan to use Sullivan. At media day, at the Iowa media day, in the little Tim Lester scrum, one of the other reporters was sort of asking for some details about some new nomenclature, and Lester wouldn't give any of that up. And again, we're talking about state secrets, so I get it. But also, if there is a special Sully package, what have you, it would be a huge departure from the way Ferentz has typically done this. And in fact, the last QB rotation that I can remember, you got to go back to 01 and Kyle McCann and a very, very green Brad Banks. And the 01 Brad Banks was still better than McCann, but he was certainly not the 02 Brad Banks at that point. So that's about how far back you have to go and about how far back or about the sort of QB situation that would necessitate a move like that from Ferentz. Now, that being said, you could probably, it wouldn't be that difficult to draw parallels between McCann/Banks and McNamara/Sullivan, especially in terms of the athleticism that they bring to the position and the level of production, level of potential that they've both got. So, we'll see if that looks more like the way that they handle this, or if it's going to be, another redux of, I believe it's 2012, where they gave literally every single snap to a very, very struggling James Vandenberg. That's right. So there's a whole lot of different ways that Iowa has handled QB. And Iowa fans usually don't agree with any of it. But this is going to be sort of that next chapter in how does Kirk Ferentz handle the QB depth chart. And, we're just speculating at this point. And it could be any number of ways to me.
Again, this is something I've heard on other podcasts, but I want to hear from what you guys think on this. What if Cade comes out against Illinois State and just looks like he did at Kids Day? What is Seth Wallace going to do? Does that defer to Tim Lester? Is Kirk saying from his living room, "What are you doing? Don't pull Cade"? And maybe does he say before the game, "Whatever you do, don't pull Cade, just win the game," sort of situation? What does Kirk do? What does he want them to do from his living room in Iowa City.
Ross, I'll let you take this one first.
Oh, sure. Thanks.
Yeah, glad to.
I think what you mentioned towards the end there, I think this is something they're going to game plan for. I think it is something that Ferentz will talk to Wallace and Lester about, like, hey, if this happens, this is what we should do. Like, they're going to have a contingency in place. I would certainly expect. What that is, I don't know. I don't think it's just McNamara, come hell or high water, damn the torpedoes. We're gonna ride Cade no matter what. I think if he's struggling as much as he was at that Kids Day practice, let's be the Iowa fans are not going to be in a good place. There's going to be 65,000 people in Kinnick Stadium, very distressed by what they're seeing, and probably making that known verbally. And so if it is that, dire, I would not be shocked to see Sullivan in the second half of that game if it came to that. That's my perspective, at least. But Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to things like the scoreboard. It's one thing if Cade is, just spraying passes all over the place, but Iowa's still up, 17-0 or 27-0 because they can just run the ball however they like. And on some level, especially with the way that Ferentz has talked about McNamara's road back, a lot of it just comes down to reps. A lot of it just comes down to gameplay. And, this is not the first time that Iowa has heard Kirk Ferentz, asking for patience with his QB, but that doesn't make it less valid in this situation too. So ultimately, we know that Kirk Ferentz's number one priority, and I'm sure, like you mentioned, Ross, that this is going to be communicated to Seth Wallace as if he even needs it to be communicated to him. But their priority number one is win the game. And so if Iowa is up double digits, I don't think that a struggle situation from McNamara is going to lead to him getting yanked, even if it's just, for a series or two. I don't think that's going to be the case. But guys, if we're looking at something that's more close to the South Dakota State game from 2021 or 22 is one of those years where it's close into the second half, I would not be surprised at all, whether it's, Ferentz or Wallace, where they say, all right, let's give number one a shot and see what happens. Because ultimately, all of these advantages that Ferentz talks about, if you can't complete a 10-yard, 15-yard out, it kind of doesn't matter. What your rapport is, what your leadership is. At some point, you got to be able to execute the position as is. And the standard of success for executing that position really, really ought to be higher than what we saw at Kids Day. And I would suspect anybody in Iowa City will tell you that, yeah, even for the Iowa passing game, the standard of success is higher than that. And then ultimately, I'll keep this part quick too, but he's got to take care of the ball. Right. Like, it's one thing to go 1 for 13. I don't think that's going to happen, but to do that with no turnovers, I think Ferentz would prefer that, especially with the state of the special teams, to 5 for 9, 3 picks. It would be my read on that too. So as long as these bad passes aren't resulting in turnovers, I think that's going to keep Cade's seat cooler too. But ultimately, yeah, it's going to come down to how the game shakes out, and there's any number of ways that can happen.
Anything else from today, guys, before we get out of here? No?
I'll mention is that Leash Williams is back practicing again. He's had a few nice days according to Ferentz, so that the Iowa backfield is pretty much at full strength. The only guy that's even dinged up at this point is Kamari Moulton, and we're talking about a third string running back there too. So Iowa will be leaning on this rushing game against Illinois State probably quite a bit. And they are happy to be at pretty close to full strength there too. So that's something that we got from the presser as well. That's all I got. Ross, anything else from you?
No. I Got nothing else.
We know Xavier Wampa and Cohen Entringer will be available week 1 as well. That's from the Phil Parker availability we got on Tuesday. That was 45 minutes later than we were told it was going to be, but that is neither here nor there. We still got Phil. We do know, well, he's hoping that he won't be in a sling for week 1 too, but we shall see what that looks like. He will be on the sideline. There is no way in hell they're putting that man in a booth during during the game. Got to see the kids in their eyes, see how they're looking. But that'll wrap it up for us here on HawkCast, this episode of HawkCast on a Thursday evening. We appreciate you tuning in. Do not forget about that 60% off your entire first year at Hawkeye Beacon. You can do that right now. That autofill link will be in the description, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever. You can just click that description, head on down, click that autofill link, and you will be good to go. 60% off your entire first year. If you're iffy about an autofill link for whatever reason, you got a suspicion for autofill links, promo code is kickoff 2024. That is promo code kickoff 2024 at checkout. Use that there, get that 60% off for your entire first year at Hawkeye Beacon. All the premium content you could ever want and need right there from us as well. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Drop a like, drop a comment on YouTube. Let us know what you're thinking about the situation at hand, Kirk's suspension. Is it BS? Because some folks definitely think it is. Some folks maybe not so much. But anyway, that'll do it for us on this episode of HawkCast. I am Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined as always by Adam Jacoby and Ross Binder. And we will see you next time.